What's going on, everybody? Welcome to an
Yo,
episode of Freight Gong Friday. We got a special guest with us today, Daniel Powell from the co-founder and CEO of Optimal Dynamics. How you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing well. Happy to be on.
Awesome.
what's up?
Thank you for coming, man. Hope everybody had a great week. We got some pretty interesting topics to talk about today. Definitely, I'd say a little bit more on the tech side of things, but Optimal Dynamics is a really interesting company. I followed them for some time now, and I think the Daniel's like founding team is also an interesting story as well that we can talk a little bit about. But Daniel, how are you doing? Where are you based out right now?
I'm doing good, man. I live in Jersey City. I live right outside of New York. So
Okay.
our headquarters is in Manhattan, Flatiron District. Pretty remote team, but I've been up here since we've been scaling the business outside of the COVID hiatus. Kind of left town for a little bit, but
I
back in
just
full force here.
I just got somewhat familiar with the Manhattan district area last weekend. My friend actually lives in Fidei, so
Yep.
it's like a couple blocks away from the World Trade Center,
Yep.
basically. So, are you guys like near that area more or less?
I am where I live. I basically have our office is a little bit closer to the Empire State Building, so we're a little bit more uptown on 27th. So about a 20 minute commute down there.
Very cool. Awesome.
Uh, what were you doing? Hold on. So you're in Jersey City. I always pull up the map whenever we're talking about stuff here. I
So
know.
I live right on the water, up near the
Yeah,
Hoboken Jersey City line. That's kind of where I live. So it's like a
yeah.
quiet
How
residential.
long does it take you to get to the Flatiron district?
About 20 minutes,
Oh,
25
that's
minutes.
not that bad. That's
No,
not
you
that
can't
bad.
complain. No, it's we beat people who live in New York to office, so it's we have to just take the living in Jersey chip on our shoulder. But besides
What
that, we get over it.
I'm trying to think of other freight tech companies that are in New York City. I think Transfix was there, right?
I think they were on the
Tran
East Coast.
yeah, Transfix. I think LoadSmart really spent most of its time. They had an office in Soho, and then there's a company called Altanya, which is a more supply chain, map the world, data world kind of a company, really cool company based in
Yeah.
Brooklyn. And they just pulled in a pretty amazing round. So one of our investors is also invested in them. So I don't know
That's
anyone else beside that though. I'll be a big city though.
yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely you need to be at the right type of company to do it. Um,
For
Cool.
sure.
Well, Daniel, so I've been following Optimal Dynamics for a couple of years now. I think you guys, when did you guys start? 2018, 2017? Maybe.
Technically we found technically we found in 2017. So
Okay.
that's when we pulled the technology out of the research lab. Spent the first couple of years more in stealth, kind of building the underlying tech, finding that product market fit, and then we've been, scaling it in a more venture-backed way since March 2020, which was a whole interesting story to itself, right around COVID. But
dude, what's the
um,
research lab? Tell us about that.
yeah, so our story starts almost 40 years ago, not with myself, but with my father. So he started working at Princeton University. His whole field of research was how do I get computers to make decisions in the physical world? Um, Coincidentally, when he started, truckload trucking became deregulated by the government, and somehow trucking became the sexiest problem to work on from the math side. So it sucked him in, and then I'm sure you guys know once you get sucked into trucking, you don't really
You
leave.
can't leave. Yeah.
You can't leave. So Kickstart 40 years back, team wrote the book. They worked on a lot of problems outside of trucking, but that was kind of the one problem that really moved the needle in a special way. So when the really sort of next generation of technology started to get developed there in this sort of like half commercial, half academic state, we saw this really cool opportunity to put some real muscle behind it and bring it out to market in a more concentrated way. So that's when that handoff in 2017 happened. But it's
What were
really
you doing
cool.
before that?
I thought I wanted to be in finance. So my whole career was baked in finance. Did a little bit of work at Merrill Lynch. Realized that the only cool things in finance aren't actually that exciting, or the only actual meaningful things in finance aren't actually that exciting. Loans and bonds, and all the quant trading is basically just legalized gambling. And so I started getting into like energy optimization. I thought that was really cool. Admittedly, not a lot of money into it, and it's almost like working in government. And so then I got sort of introduced to the freight world, and used some of the business side to start the company, some of the new interest in modeling, and just talking about algorithms over Thanksgiving dinner for 15 years sets you up pretty well to kind of poke into the space in a material way.
That sounds like a pretty awesome Thanksgiving dinner conversation to me. At least
unique.
Unique.
Do you have,
yeah.
like,
At least
do you have a crotchety uncle who's got kind of not PC opinions about algorithms?
Funny enough, we actually do. He builds cranes for the movie industry out of his garage, which is like incredible that he does it.
Wow.
But super smart guy, not so much into the math side of the house, but definitely have one of those.
That's good. Everyone needs that.
So how did walk us through how the first conversation, with your father, started, like the inception of the business, like how did that come about, and what was the deciding factor? Like, hey, we're going to incorporate a company here. How did the decisions around the roles also get decided too?
Yeah, it's a little different than maybe some other companies where a person worked in Convoy, or they worked for Echo or whoever for 10 years. They saw this like very specific issue that was very relevant to them, and they thought that there was a big enough problem. Like, that's a lot of the backstories that you see for startups. This one kind of backed into it. Probably took longer than it should have that way, but it gave us a different view. I did a stint at that research lab when I was moving from finance to energy. At that time, they were working with some energy projects, doing math modeling. So it was like right at the right time, and I was transitioning. So I was in this kind of like awkward middle ground. And so that's when I got firsthand experience with the inside, the bowels of the lab. Also got firsthand experience on some incredible technology that had merit to be brought to market, but was just sort of sitting there. So when I wanted to do a little bit more interesting work, we had that kind of conversation of, could this actually be pulled out of the lab? Like, is this possible? He actually wanted to start a company back in 2008. Wasn't a great time, admittedly, to start a business. And so the stars just aligned, and then it took a little bit of time to figure out exactly what we wanted to do, as it should, before you really sort of roll your sleeves up. But that's kind of how it came to be. In terms of like who does what, at that time he was still fully working at Princeton. This was my company, so I think we did like an 80-20 split at start, and I probably did more than 80% of the work, but he had a lot of I got a lot of credit handed to me to kind of go run with, so that definitely helped with the endeavor. But cool. Yeah, that's kind of the story. It was more backing into it than jumping to it, for the most part, at least to start here.
And what would you guys decide to build first?
The first idea actually wasn't to solve trucking. When you think about the work that was done, it was just about, we solve trucks today, but a truck is just a thing in space, right? It's a physical resource with a bunch of constraints around it. And that same approach can be used to a lot of other, topics. This could be inventory, very close to, what trucking does. This could be, blood inventory levels at hospitals, or electrons on electrical grids. So like the same approach applies in many areas. So we first started actually with this idea of more of a data-driven consulting shop. And just kind of using that as a way to sort of get the business off on its feet, and then just learn more quickly rather than just jumping randomly into one area or the other. Um, at that time, the ELD mandate was starting to come into effect. There was a lot of movement of, hey, now it's required to have the underlying data in trucking. And so that's when it kind of quickly kind of pulled into the trucking landscape. Plus, there were some really mature tool sets to jump into. So that, first couple of years was just finding that fit before we really made a splash. And then,
Do you
we got
think do you
pulled
think
into
that the
trucking on the back of that.
ELD do you think that you would have joined the industry if the ELD mandate didn't happen?
It would have really limited 2/3 of our customers today. You hear like brand name customers on our LinkedIn page, but 2/3 of our customers today are less than 300 trucks.
Yeah.
And I bet you many of those would have lagged behind on the ELD mandate, or even just this like mindset of data, right?
Yeah.
You would have like gotten into it in 2020 begrudgingly, and then you would have kind of half used it and not enforced things, and then they yell at us because things are wrong. So I would say it was definitely a catalyst. It definitely helped quite a lot for companies like us.
Yeah, there's probably like a whole segment of businesses that either wouldn't exist or it would be a lot harder to do.
Yeah, I mean, look at like P44, for example.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's pretty interesting.
They capitalized on it better than anyone else for good reasons. Like, hey, now we can track. Let's pull this data and aggregate it, sell it.
I'm wondering what the next like market. Basically, that was like a step function change almost, right? It was because of a new regulation that came out federally. It created a new space essentially for everybody to play in, and a new opportunity for everybody to pursue. And I wonder if there's going to be anytime soon another type of step function change in this market that will either open up more data or basically require fleets to use a new specific type of technology. But I haven't seen anything specifically like too much on the horizon outside of maybe kind of like in the fraud space. There might be something cooking where you're kind of trying to figure out how to legitimize your company with some type of a stamp of approval. Maybe that might be on the horizon. Pretty interesting. But I don't know, Dan, have you seen anything kind of cooking up on the horizon?
I haven't. My guess is you're probably right from like a federal, like a mandate side. It'd be hard pressed to see them take another leap on things like data quality or data sharing. My guess from anything on our side of the house, albeit fraud is a big one. Even when we get into like sourcing freight or product source, the brokers that we talk to are, how do you prevent fraud? So I think some of those things will help just maybe reduce the friction, right? You just have this higher level of trust. And when you have higher level of trust, you just need less people monitoring, right? You just have less things go wrong, which helps with automation. My guess is probably going to come from more like demand of shippers, on time percentages, compliance percentages, just general efficiency. The idea that some other carriers are running more efficiently with better technology. And if you're going to come to the table with a contract, you're just going to get beat if you're not there. But I'd be pretty surprised. I don't live a lot in this world on like Capitol Hill. I'd just be pretty surprised if anything comes soon that's going to like federally mandate. That work.
Things move slow over there for sure. That's guaranteed. But
for sure,
we'll see. Maybe with if Elon comes in and cleans up shop, then maybe things move a little bit faster. But we'll see. Those are all speculations, of course. But anyway,
he's one to warp timelines. All rules are out the window if he's.
That's exactly.
He's in charge.
Exactly true. That might be the step function change. Who knows? That might change how things work as well. So, but okay. So you started this company. It started out as consulting business, and you started working with a couple of different companies. ELD mandate came about, and then basically the foray into trucking started with we're now going to kind of take advantage of the fact that all this data is actually going to be available now, like where the trucks are moving. And you started building what is now, what we now know as optimal dynamics, which is an algorithmic, and this is my understanding of what optimal dynamics is, and feel free to obviously correct me afterwards. But it's basically an optimization algorithm that you can plug into your product, or it is a product in itself that you can use, which helps you optimize which trucks should be sent where to pick up which loads for which prices in which markets, right?
Yeah. So where we are, I guess, defining where we are today, then we kind of go back in time of like how we got here, because product evolution is truly an evolution. We sort of pitch ourselves as a holistic decision automation and optimization platform, and holistic is important because our decisions span everything from year out planning decisions to day of human operational automation decisions. We're pretty big sticklers on, and I'm sure we'll dive into like why we use certain approaches. What is the correct tools to solve the real problem? How do you actually move the needle for a trucking company? Not from 0 to 1, not 10% or 2% here, or you like drive 10% automation, but like how do you actually move the needle? I'd rather go work on something else, to be honest, if all this work just equated to 3% human automation efficiency. Not really.
So you think
you
think it's obviously like there's gigantic gains to be made by companies.
Yeah,
else you wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, it's the whole point. It's why we have our capital investment. It's to solve a different problem. It's the best comparison that I can make is you get into a Toyota and you go on the highway and it has lane keep assist and it drives down, and then you have Elon Musk over there who also can do that, but is solving a very, very different problem because he's trying to automate the entire driving experience. That is probably the best way to think about what OD is trying to do in our ethos and our investment. So let's take operational automation. So there's really two fundamental big things that happen on a planning floor for a trucking company. Given that tender acceptances are at 100% right now, or 98% right now. You're either figuring out which load is moving on your asset fleece versus logistics, given that a lot of companies have this, or which driver is taking which load. We've hit on enterprise 99.2% automation as our highest level for planning floors. We have an enterprise customer. They have one person planning their entire division. They put them in a private office so no one talks to them, and they plan the full way. We have a mid-market customer that we just had a case study with. They went from a 5-person planning team and they went down to one person planning the entire company. And each of them both had over 20% lift in revenue per truck per week. So the methods to the madness are moving the needle. But the thing that's most important for us is like I have this maybe cynical belief that human in the loop is a bit of a fallacy when it comes into automation.
Really?
That's like such a that's such like a buzzy thing people say.
Well,
we're just gonna have human in the loop, human augmented.
It's like buying your chauffeur a self-driving car. What do you really expect them to do afterwards?
It's beer butler in the car. Beer butler in the car. Would you like some food? Would you like some dinner?
Yeah, it's real though. It's a real conversation. But yeah, anyway, so our focus is on that operational automation. We take it out to the strategic level too, RFP procurement. The reality of this problem is carriers can't just say no to tenders for as they wish and see. They have to do that during contract cycle. So focusing on tools that help them with their business at contracting cycle is just as important when it comes time to execution. We think about it as like a balanced problem, right? If you have contracts set up wrong, you can have the best automation optimization tools in the world. It won't mean really much. Vice versa, you get like awesome contracts, but your ops execution is terrible. Service is gonna be bad, efficiency is bad.
Well, what does it mean that set up wrong?
For most of our customers, we focus on trucking carriers that are generally 50 trucks. So our customer base is 50 trucks, mostly 100, but 50 trucks up to we have a couple of the jumbo enterprises on our plate, and then we also work with private fleets and dedicated fleets. as well. Many of these carriers are moving 40% of their freight, 80% of their freight, 90% of their freight through RFP commitments. And those are
Right.
done on some cadence. They're moving more quickly now, but annual commitments are still the lion's share of what goes on. And so what you do during contracting cycle is sort of the skeleton of your business through operational execution.
I see.
And so you have to sort of figure out what decisions when really move the needle for the business.
It's the
And
configuration. It's the configuration basically of and the decision making during contracting, like quoting season, essentially, where you decide I'm going to take this lane, this lane, this lane, and it's kind of going to all pair up together. For
yeah, where should we be hiring drivers? Where should we be bidding on lanes? So those are the
Uh,
decisions that you make. If you think about decisions from like 1 year out to day up. A year out, you're thinking about your driver hiring policies.
mhm.
What types of drivers can we hire and where should we hire? You saw this movement from like super, super long haul over the road out for a month to more like weekend type drivers because they're easier to hire. What's
Mhm.
the impact on our ability to move that capacity? So you think about this, what do I do a year out? And you get that set up. And after that, you kind of have that set, right? You can't move those things every day. You've already signed that agreement with Walmart or Target or whoever on the
Mhm.
freight that you're moving. Then you have this decision sort of 2 weeks out, which is you can tend to reject a little bit if you really can't make it, but you should hit your commitments. Um, you can allocate freight between asset and logistics if you have that functionality within your organization and your shipper allows that. That's growing a lot these days. And then the big one is how do you actually execute it? Which driver takes which load? So we feel that if we're going to take a company and not just human automate it, which is a lot of where we put our time, but really move the needle, in a material way, we need to make sure that we're solving the full end-to-end problem, or we're just solving a small piece of the bigger puzzle. And so that's kind of the overarching kind of platform at OD. So we have 3 products. One's called Plan, one's called Bid, and one's called Execute. Bid is all about RFP procurement. Plan's all about driver hiring by a shipper that leaves me, what's the impact on those, and then Execute, which admittedly gets probably the lion's share of the discussion. That's the thing that automates ops floors, operational dispatching and planning and execution.
can
So that's kind
customers
of
use can customers use one of those products only, or it would seem like they probably would need to use all 3? But do you have some customers using only one of the 3 or 2 of the 3?
we only have one actually using one of our tools. They use it for procurement events, but they're a huge jumbo operator. Outside of that, everyone else purchases the whole tool, and then probably around 95% of our customer base moves from their TMS workflow into OD for their dispatch and planning. Some people use our APIs to empower their homegrown systems that they have. We have a couple of different customers who do that, but most people use the OD workflow.
What level of sophistication do you see in the market, like for folks that you aren't already working with? Does it just like completely run the gamut, or do
Completely.
yeah.
How we go about selling our solution and educating, we have a big tag, like education is in our DNA, comes from our lineage, but the tools and service off the access to information from the industry is really hard, right? It's onto the onus of probably the company selling to it, which can be a bit conflicting. So we try to do the best job possible to properly educate our customers from end to end. That goes into the buying cycle on how we work with our customers through our sales processes. It goes into published white papers about our algorithms, right? You don't see anyone else kind of doing that because we want to be as transparent as possible, like what we're doing, so that we have the CRSTs in the world, the most advanced, the Uber's buying our technology. But we also have, incredible companies like Ploger Transportation, which is a 70 truck fleet that you
Yeah,
guys
they're in
probably
Ohio,
never heard
right?
of. Yeah,
They're big on. They tweet all the time. I follow them on Twitter.
but there you go. They're buying our technology. They just implement it. They just had a 20% lift in revenue per truck.
Interesting.
That wouldn't be the type of company, 10 years ago that would buy this technology. But they're starting to learn, get comfortable with what this means. They can talk to our other customers and build that confidence level. They can see the impact in their own data. And then for a user, you can learn to use our tool in 60 seconds, our dispatch tool. It's see decisions, click button, move on with your day. It's super simple. There are much more advanced workflows within the OD tool set. But for that ops planner, it really doesn't take more than just a couple minutes to learn the workflow. And they're not thinking about algorithms all day. They're thinking about, are 98% of these decisions good for my network? And OD tries to hit that benchmark. So makes it much easier for them.
That's interesting.
So I just went to the website, and I'll try to share this here as well, just so that we can kind of like highlight what some of these products actually look like here. Give me a second. But it seems like this is actually a standalone app that will that your users log into. It seems like, so this is the plan product, right? So this is the one that will help you help me out here. This is the product that's going to help you optimize your loads, or once you have them.
So yeah, plan and bid are offline tools. So they run off historical data to ask questions. This is actually an old UI, so we're actually about to update our website. But this is where you can say, hey, is Walmart working for me? Is this lane working for me? What if I removed this account from my customer base? What would be the impact? What if I started hiring drivers? So this is the offline year-out component. This tool is used much more irregularly than our operational tool, because this is like your quarterly, questions that you're asking to pull the big levers.
I see.
The next workflow would be bid, which would be somewhere here. I'm not sure where it is on the website.
Bid will be under here. I think it was bid.
Yeah. So bid is similar workflow, similar time to decision. But this is where you take these kludgy Excel sheets that the shipper sent over, you pull it into your bid tool, and then it basically tells you lane by lane, given the rates, market rates, what lanes work for your network and what lanes don't, based off of your configuration. So understanding your market balance, and
this has to take obviously into account where your trucks have moved historically, right? That's basically what this is based on.
Yeah. So it is. We actually pull in our real customers' operational data. So all the loads they had available to themselves, and then we're able to basically. The best way to think about it is like remodeling the world. So our tool would be actually simulating, if I was running my business, now that my customer is sending us data, how would it impact my networks? And if I could choose which lanes to move, which ones would I want? And so you can see here, it quickly says which lanes I would have liked in my network during that time, which lanes I'd like the user to go review in more detail because there's some risks here. Maybe it's a high idle or a market balance issue that puts a little bit at risk. And then, hey, what are the lanes that you should just aggressively stay away from because they don't fit your network?
And this lane score, this column that says like lane score, that's basically just a metric that's kind of you guys just come up with. You guys have a formula to come up with the lane score, and that lane score is from 0 to 100, saying 100 is the best lane you could be taking right now, and 0 is the worst lane you can be taking right now.
Yeah, you actually can see it on the right-hand side of the screen. So every trucking company is the same. Every trucking company is different, right? So there's a lot of things that are similar, and there's a lot of things that we allow them to tune. So a lot of what we do is kind of preset. We're trying to figure out what's the most profitable, what get drivers home, what meets the needs of the network. For example, we take into account, let's say I have a core shipper that I run my business on. These new businesses can't interact with that, right? They need to support that. So we make sure that these new lanes are supporting that major business that we've calibrated with you. And then to customize the tool in our setup process, we allow them to sort of tune what they think is tolerable or good for their network with our solutions team, so that when they see a score, they know, hey, I've worked with the team. I've set this in a way that when I see green, I know that's go. versus another customer might be more okay with other effects in their network that another customer might not be. So it's slightly tunable for each customer so that it can kind of quickly make those decisions.
Got it. Got it. And then we got one
And
other.
then,
Go ahead.
And then execute. Yeah, execute is that's the iceberg. So the execute screens are the simple ones, but this is where the automation happens. So when we talk about all the tools, all the buckets of techniques under this kind of AI umbrella that we work with, they are there to drive maximum decision automation for two workflows. So one is either tender acceptance, but most of our customers are doing load allocation. So, hey, I was tendered a load. Should I move this load through my asset division or my logistics division? And then moving down, which is the most transactional system, would be our dispatch workflow. So I think it's a little bit lower on the screen.
Out of curiosity, you guys are having you guys have like a shipper ID here. Have you guys had to deal with the whole problem of the fact of how like a particular facility is not necessarily representative of like the company as a whole, and like that the company has multiple facilities? And this is more like just like a totally nuanced question, but we deal with some of this at Shipper CRM, where like a shipper, a lot of people like refer to a shipper as like a particular, there's actually no standardization around that term, but shipper sometimes is referred to as like a location or as like a company as a whole, like that that's my shipper, like that's who I'm moving freight with. Like, how do you guys represent that internally?
So when you're in this workflow, so let's say it's let's just say, hey, you're tender accepting everything. Like my business is a logistics service company. I'm not trying to reject freight. I'm trying to move it in the different ways that I have. We then need to think about that impact of that load into the network. And so this is the critical component where we now have known information and we have to blend it with what might come, right? So shippers are tendering us information, a day to a week out. And for most trucking companies, let's say 3 or 4 days out, they may only have 50% of their loads booked. So we need to understand that sort of ripple effect on the network. So that kind of goes down into, yes, so we have to model and actually even forecast down to not only the shipper behavior, but the facility, lane, region, and time behavior. And then we also have to go a step that. So you kind of, we'll get bucketed into kind of this term stochastic optimization, but what it means is optimizing when variables are unknown at time of the decision. It's not that we're trying to make it more complex. It's just that's what the problem is. So let's take another shipper. Let's say they say they're going to send you 3 loads a day, but what do they actually do? Sometimes they send you 1, sometimes they send you 5, sometimes they send you 2, sometimes they don't send you anything. So when we're trying to make a decision, we're also trying to understand that your other accounts are going to send you this variable information. So when you see an 100% load score, we know that that works in 100% of the scenarios, even if we don't know exactly how that load is going to get executed. And it's critical for it. We just had a big enterprise hit their record high operational efficiency week. But for some reason, they were getting a 20% cancellation rate from their shippers. Not because of anything that they were doing. Their shippers were just tendering them loads and then canceling them. Typically, those are shocks into the network that would really disrupt things. But when you're actually modeling all the different variable outcomes that might happen, you're taking in the fact that sometimes Walmart sends you 3 loads, sometimes they send you 6 loads, and you're understanding all the outputs that can happen. And then you're saying, hey, this load works on all of those outputs. It allows us to build significantly more resiliency into the decision. And so that's kind of where all that load acceptance workflow happens. And then dispatching is the sort of where the rubber meets the road. So this is what driver takes what load and automating that process. So this is where we're, in some cases at, 95, 99% automation, where we are saying which driver takes which load, which tour, and then there's a lot of other cool kind of effects within this workflow that drives that level of.
So this in a way is a light TMS in a way for asset-based companies. or is this in it? Does this plug in and synchronize like with a TMS, or is it a kind of a hybrid of both?
No, the latter is correct. So we have some really close TMS partners. You know, McLeod, we work with McLeod heavily. A lot of our customers are them. We work with TMW. We have other integrations with companies like PCS and some others, and then we also have our API. So we do not replace the TMS. We think
I didn't want to try to reduce this, to a TMS, but there's definitely TMS like functions in here that you can see for sure.
We definitely take over certain workflows that people used to do in a TMS.
Okay.
So we're not replacing the TMS. That's sort of our source of truth. That's where all the data flows into and out of. That's like the source of execution.
Mm-hmm.
But we do replace those sort of execution workflows that a customer would do. That's manual assignments that they're doing all day. At this point, you go in here, it's providing all of those decisions, and then you can execute them right through the platform.
Damn, you're going from a cloud to this. That's like must be a big jump in user experience quality.
It's
not on the cloud. I mean, it's just old.
Very nice UI, by the way.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I will give credit to McLeod. Has done. We have had a very long working relationship with McLeod. So we have worked on integration for more than 4 years with them. To the point where once we get credentials, we can have a working integration done in an hour into our system.
That's pretty good.
That is far quicker than I would have thought it would have been for McLeod.
Normally like 4 months.
That's the working order. That was us before. I used to take 4 months to get a call, but we really work well with them. You got to remember that the new age of person who's now learning McLeod also has Uber on their phone and Facebook, Twitter.
A little savvier, hopefully.
They're used to a new experience, right? And if you actually think about the workflow here is actually way simpler than this super enterprise human process that McLeod supported, at least for the execution. So the learning is quite easy. The biggest thing that you have to get over is you now gave a self-driving car to your chauffeur, and you've told them to trust it. So like, what are the tools you do to build that trust? And that kind of leads into, well, one, there's no half-assing automation, right? You either solve the self-driving car problem or you don't. You're not going to get into an 80% self-driving car. And so we can't do that either.
It seems like that actually is, so far what I've been experiencing is that it's probably driving like my Model 3 is like driving probably 90% of the time for me. But that that's the different. I would say that's like that's the differing opinion that I would have on it, is that the human in the loop along the way allows you to actually just like catch the mistakes, but Tesla just figured out a way to do it so seamlessly where you can use the automation as you want, and the moment that you basically disengage, they kind of capture that information as a correction, and they just immediately take that correction, feed it back into the system, and then improve the system to not make that mistake in the future. So like that's definitely always been the benefit of like kind of quote unquote human in the loop. And I don't know, do you guys, is there an aspect of that in Optimal or an OD where you guys are kind of capturing potentially automation mistakes? The users are able to capture automation mistakes and then kind of have the system improve its ability in the future?
Yeah, it's a good analogy. I'm waiting on, I just got a new update for my Model Y for whatever 12.5. I'm excited to try it out. But yeah, you're not there yet. You're staying on Waymo, you are there. So I said I've got a pretty brash term where human in the loop is a fallacy, and it's wrong, but it's more right than it is wrong for the technology that can support it. So take like the OD planning suite. It's the culmination of 30 years of work. We've dumped in probably $30 million just to algorithmic development. What it can do across a whole series of companies is pretty incredible. We're not in a place where you can get rid of all humans who are doing the execution. And our job isn't actually to get rid of people, but is it to reallocate. The fallacy is that you can put this in the hands of people who were doing the same job before and just say, hey, we're going to up level all of you to do your job. When we work with companies, we pick OD super users. And it's usually a 1-to-3 to 1-to-10 ratio of what they historically did. And their job are QA team members. So you have to think about the role change where their job isn't to plan and think about every decision. Their job is to think about just the exceptions, but it's a very different thought process. So I think when people talk about human loop, they say, hey, I'm a planner. I'm going to give you this technology so that you can do, your planning like you did before, but a little bit better. When you're hitting automation levels of decisions, that doesn't work because the chauffeur is always going to drive that steering wheel in the self-driving car. So you need to think about it differently. Think about it like how some companies have done warehouse automation. They don't monitor every forklift. They sit in a central hub, and when an alert goes off, they then take over. And they take over that forklift that needs to get out of a jam. Same with how Waymo does it.
Waymo
That's
does the same, yeah.
They do the same way. Hey, I'm having an issue. Like, help me out. Even Waymo knows they're not there yet, even though I think their disengagement rates
It's
every
low.
94,000 miles and Tesla's 500 miles. They still have that process. So that's how OD thinks. And it's the culmination of, because of what we've done on the tech side, we can now put our foot down and say, hey, you two people who used to do planning, we want you to obsess over how happy your drivers are. You two people who are over planning as well, we want you to obsess on winning more freight, talking to your customers. And you, Mrs. Planner, we want you to focus on when things break or data's not right. But your job is to execute 80% of these decisions and then figure out the 20% that doesn't work. And that's kind of where, human in the loop as standard or said is unfortunately a fallacy, because I think people don't want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is, automation is a sticky subject, but roles are changing, and we need to face that head on, or we're not going to get the change that we want.
So to the topic of automation, we've had a couple of guests on talking about, just the great automation debate and whether or not, let's say, like freight brokerages themselves will,
Sure.
be able to be completely automated. But what's your have you spent any time thinking about what the 10-year impact, what things will look like 10 years from now, right? When there is a lot of automation adopted, how does the market itself change? Does it introduce actually more fragmentation and more individual companies, maybe smaller companies? Is it more of a consolidated market where there's fewer but much larger companies that basically can do much more with as many?
This isn't a multiple choice question. This is a fill in the blank. This is a fill in the blank question.
Yeah. This is because there's many ways to think about it, right? Like, at least from how I've been thinking about it. But
from the asset side, there's probably like a couple trains of thought that I have. So one is you have tool sets that enable a one-person truck to operate like a bigger company because they inject into a network like Uber or whoever. And then there's that same train of thought of, if an 1,000 truck company who has all that capital is planning with 3 people, they now don't have the overhead that they were once competing against themselves that a small company was. And so how does an 100 truck company compete with an 1,000 truck company that has the service capital, not going out of business, and the cost? That's really hard. You could also argue that the 300 truck company can have more care in their customers and be equally as efficient with technology. So I'm not sure. I think there's going to be some split in the seas somewhere where you either just really shed the cost and plug into a bigger network, or you kind of consolidate and honestly just automate away and keep those costs down to compete. Usually these trends are never as big as anyone thinks. I would say in like a utopic world, it would be like this split in the middle, and it would be like big and small using automation. But I think in freight, there's just enough specialized management, where I think it's going to be a small shift, but then a heavy focus from the shippers to, expect better service at lower rates because others can do that via tech-enabled offerings. So that's probably my view. There's probably a lot of opposition against that, but it's hard to tell. It's a sticky item.
I don't know if there's a lot of opposition because I think it's not as super clear what how it's going to be. But I think a small amount of change will probably be the more likely way. I think I would agree with you on that. So one other question, Reed, do you have anything that you wanted to ask? Because I have at least one other thing.
You go first. I got a couple things. We'll do mine at the end.
So Dan, when it comes to this optimization algorithm, part of what it's doing is forecasting ahead. If you take a certain load, and then you take another load after that, and another load after that, and so forth, how far ahead are you guys able to actually see kind of how far ahead is this algorithm able to kind of look? How many loads ahead is it able to kind of weigh,
Sure.
Weigh the potential outcomes?
Yeah, I totally understand. So there are two different workflows that have two different time ranges. So when we're doing that load acceptance or allocation, we're actually up to doing, I think 21 days is our longest customer out. And at that point, what we're actually doing is we're trying to say, hey, what might happen in the world? So that's where we blend forecasted information and a variety of it, right? Because we can't just plan one perfect world like a house of cards or it doesn't work. So that's the longest we do those types of decisions where you have a load. We're trying to make a decision. Most of that happens sub 10 days out in the real world for most decisions, but we have some customers do specialized, pharma stuff, and they just have much longer lead times. So that would be out to there. And then you have the execution flow. So we have customers that tour build, 3, 4. We have one that's like 8 loads out, given their network. But that's not the goal of what a truckload platform should be doing, because it's not the problem. So when you think about a trucking company, when they're actually planning, they have this this thing called like a booking profile. So the booking profile is basically how many loads do they have booked per day against their total volume. So day one, they're going to have 95% of their loads booked. Day 2, they're going to have 75% of their loads booked. Day 3, they're going to have 30% of their loads booked. Right? That's just how this freight gets transacted. So when we're trying to build a tour, that's not always the name of the game. We need to also be careful of what freight might come. So when we actually plan a driver on a load, we're never planning them on a forecasted load. Like that's not a real thing. You can only dispatch a truck onto a real load. But we might take into account that when they land in Chicago, we don't want to just attach them to the next load because it's there. Because in the reality, when we're planning on Wednesday, we only have a third of our freight. And so we need to be cognizant and say, hey, if we're going to make that decision, we are so confident it's going to be better than what might come, we're going to be good for it. So the problem of trucking is planning this partial problem. It's not like planning vehicles in Uber where you're just kind of going around Fifth Avenue. It is this problem where you're having to make decisions and half the data isn't known. And when data is unknown, it's inevitably uncertain. And then so when it's uncertain, you have to deal with the uncertainty, and you can't fix uncertainty because we can't make a perfect world. So 2 workflows, we do tour building, but the biggest critical item is, we have this example that we do. So you take a driver and they have 2 loads to pick from, and one has more profit than the other. Often what you do, so legacy technology, like technology you'd see in market or people, is you chase that carrot, right? You see good and you take it. But you don't take into account the downstream value of that decision. That's sort of, I'm now 500 miles away from home in an area, so I just got bribed to do something, and you're like, crap, that wasn't good. Our systems try to learn. It's a method called reinforcement learning. Basically, it's machines training and iterations to learn outcomes. To say, hey, if I took that cheaper load, I'm now actually in a much better area to get my driver home, meet service levels, drive profitability, because trucking networks are trying to drive impact on the long game, not just chase the carrots. Like the good example is taking that load into Florida. It looks like a great rate. Your hunch knows that you're going to get killed going out, but a classical system would just say, great load, let me grab it, with no understanding of the downstream. So long-winded answer, it's just a little bit more nuanced because it matters kind of what question you're asking and then what you're trying to do at the time of the decision. So for a user, I mean, this all goes back to the decisions. They see logical, albeit different than we would have done, logical decisions, right? I'm not going to go take that incredibly high-paying load into Florida because they know that there's not going to be able to get out of it. Our systems would say, hey, yeah, that sucks too. Like we hate that as well. It was impossible to get that driver out when we train the models. So different workflows. You can extend out into tour building, but that's really not what most decisions are done within the trucking network. And so that's kind of where this game really changes with this problem. It's very different than, like LTL or local intercity moves where you have, hey, I have 20 orders and what's the smallest path to do 20 orders? Trucking is all of, I have half my loads booked. How do I execute this information knowing I'm going to get more freight? So it's a very different problem.
So
very different.
So when it comes to reinforcement learning, it's basically the act of penalizing or rewarding for taking a certain type of action. How far, this is maybe no definite answer to this, but how far are you away from rewarding or penalizing this algorithm enough to basically be able to predict, to 99.99999% certainty that it's made the right decision, it's made the right call to go and take that load out of Florida or wherever, right? Like how, because basically it's very similar to the self-driving car problem. It's like the trail of nines. It's like 99.99109% of the time it's not going to make a mistake, and that's when it's probably going to be good enough to really,
Yeah, that's a good question. You are right. The long tail is like the death. It's like 1,000 paper cuts. That's why it's taken, it took a company, $5 million to get a car to drive down the middle of the road and $20 billion to make a self-driving car.
Sure.
We don't really waste too much time trying to solve the 5 nines out. We're kind of probably more blocked at data quality.
Okay.
Getting into 99.9. We're at our highest number. We have a mid-market at 100. Highest in enterprise was 99.3, which, to give you context, most dispatch algorithms are at 10%. I mean, that's what market does. Is like 10%.
Yeah, that's basically 993 loads out of 1,000 you've gotten right. And how do you actually determine whether you were right or not? Like in general, is that comparing historical data and basically in hindsight, once, after 30 days of all the loads moved 30 days ago, you kind of go back and see, like, was there anything better that we could have taken?
Yeah, I guess it would be sort of going to self-driving cars, right could mean you completed the task. So, and then was it good? So 99.2 means that they would follow our optimal recommendation 99.2% of the time. The good part is after that month was over, or 2 months was over, their revenue per truck lifted by 20%. So usually you try to track operational improvements in conjunction with these high adherence, and that sort of leads you to say, hey, we followed all the decisions, customers didn't fire us, drivers didn't quit, and we made more money. Like that feels pretty right.
Okay,
it's pretty easy to know if something's not working in this world.
In the real world, yeah. You get a pretty angry CEO who calls you pretty quickly if things have turned south. I've been in that seat before. It's not fun.
Next thing you know, you're sending trucks to Florida for $1 a mile because the machines told you to do so.
Yeah, and trucking CEOs are not shy to get on the phone and let you know their feelings.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, Daniel, any closing thoughts? Anything you want to make sure the audience knows about OD? How to reach out? How to get in contact? Is it a product that they can try out right now? Do they need to get a demo?
Yeah. If you want to learn about OD, go to our website, optimaldynamics.com. We have an incredible sales team. We'll work hand in hand with you for that. That's going to be a very enlightening process. we would say if you're ever going to deal with OD, you're going to be educated one way or the other at the end of the process. And then outside of this, it's kind of just my proverbial, like, make sure you're asking the right questions, make sure you understand your business before you kind of get into these things. And it's too easy to kind of chase marketing. So hopefully working with OD is an informative process. But yeah, go to our website, reach out, ping us on LinkedIn. We have a pretty sort of decent following there too, if you're ever interested in learning more.
Very cool. All right. One final question. You've started a company. This is your first company that you've started. What advice would you have for people out there who are starting a company, whether or not it's in freight or not, but from things that you've learned, what would be like the number one piece of advice or a couple things that you'd want to share?
I'm gonna post this. My favorite quote is you're far more likely to die via suicide than murder.
Statistically speaking, I think that's right.
Heads down and solve problems, to be honest. I think people spend far too much time pre-product market fit chatting and waving their hands around. I think you got to solve a problem that matters. You got to solve a problem that moves the needle. And if you're going to make a difference and raise kind of venture capital, you got to solve a big problem. But in that light, you also don't have to solve, world-changing problems. There's a lot of really good problems that necessitate small businesses. So as long as you're solving a problem that matters, you can make some level of a business around it. But I would just heads down, make your problem work. If you're an early stage company, you're more likely to kill yourself than have some outsider come do that for you. So I think a lot of people get distracted in that way.
Very cool.
That makes sense. This is all pretty interesting. This is definitely out of my wheelhouse. I know Christian thinks about this stuff a lot, and that's why I kind of listened more than I asked on this one. What do you go to conferences? Like, what do you do during the year? Like, why will we see you around anywhere?
I'm at some conferences this year. I'll be at McLeod this year. I have a couple talks there. I'm flying to Dallas next week for the Uber Freight conference. I'm speaking there as well. My team's at most of the conferences, standard conferences. So we're there one way or the other. Yeah. Admittedly, I'm spending a lot more time these days at customers and conferences.
That's a good little buzzy phrase you can use there.
Yeah,
that's a good way to dunk on people on LinkedIn. Is just say something like that. Just put that one in your back pocket.
Spend more time with your customers, not at conferences.
We have amazing partners. I make sure I go there, work with them hand in hand. It really makes the difference for us for those types of ones. And then we have just, honestly, at this point, our head of sales, Ashley Hart, just amazing. I'm not adding much value there when he's already there in person. So, he can handle these things as well. And, I have a good team to kind of support me now that I've sold my soul to the devil like 3 or 4 years ago, getting to this point and kind of going there. So that's kind of what my day looks like most of these days.
Nice.
Awesome. Daniel, thank you so much. This was a pleasure meeting you, pleasure talking to you, learning about OD. And thank you everybody for tuning in. It was a great episode. We will see you next week. I think we got another guest queued up for next week as well. So, but another big thank you, Daniel, for coming on. And we will see everybody next week.
Please.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Take care.